Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into a topic that touches nearly every financial transaction, every status symbol, and, well, probably every anxious thought you have during the week. Money. But we're not looking at P&Ls or stock fluctuations today. No. Today, our sources provide really an extraordinary masterclass in Stoic philosophy, sometimes referred to as kaikak in certain parts of the world as it pertains to wealth, ethics, and I think most urgently, your inner freedom.
Yeah, this is definitely a deep dive with a necessary mission. Because the source material points out something fundamental, a societal failure, really, that seems to have plagued humanity for, well, millennia.
Kids.
We are comprehensively taught how to chase money, right? How to accumulate it, how to manage it on spreadsheets, but almost never how to look at it philosophically or, how to integrate it ethically into a life well-lived, a virtuous life.
Exactly. I mean, we live in a civilization that constantly confuses the means of living, the money, the resources, with the meaning of life itself. It's easy to do. The pressure to acquire is just immense, isn't it?
It is.
And it often feels like there's this philosophical vacuum, right, where a sense of purpose should be. Like, what's it all for?
And that's precisely why we need these ancient guides. We're lucky, really, that the sources bring together three radically different perspectives, but they all converge on this single truth about money and the self.
Yeah, the lineup is amazing. We have Seneca.
Right, the immensely wealthy philosopher, a man who was, let's be honest, incredibly successful in worldly terms. He knew how to live among riches without being consumed by them. That's key.
Then Marcus Aurelius, the emperor. Talk about power. Grappling with supreme, almost unlimited power, yet still focused inward.
And crucially, the third voice is Epictetus, a former slave. He understood, maybe better than anyone, the brutal reality of external control and why internal freedom is absolutely non-negotiable.
So you have the view from the palace, the advisor's chair, and from, well, the bottom rung. Yet they all offer this unified perspective that just cuts through the noise of modern capitalism, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And they all zero in on one central, maybe even brutal question. A question we're really challenging you, the listener, to face throughout this deep dive.
Which is,
are you controlling your money, or is your money controlling you? That struggle for mastery, that's the core conflict of the Stoic financial life. Everything else sort of spins out from there. #1, money as a revealing mirror. Tested character.
okay, so let's start with the wealthy philosopher himself, Seneca, because as you said, he wasn't preaching poverty from some ivory tower. He owned vast estates. He was a powerful advisor.
Tremendously successful, yeah. His genius, though, was in understanding the psychological threat of wealth. It wasn't just about managing assets. It was about managing the self around those assets.
And he introduced this incredibly challenging idea, didn't he? Money as voluntary slavery. Sounds like a contradiction.
It does sound paradoxical, but it's starkly practical when you break it down. Seneca knew wealth isn't inherently evil, it's neutral, really. His warning was clear, though. Riches are not a sin, but the person who lets them control their soul has voluntarily become a slave.
Wow. That word voluntarily, it hits hard. It implies the chains are self-imposed. We choose them, maybe without even realizing it.
We choose them because they look so attractive.
Wow.
Right? They look like freedom, like security, like power.
And that connects instantly to what the source material calls the modern diagnosis. We live in an age where people are, well, willing to sell the most valuable thing they have, their time, this finite resource.
Along with their dignity, sometimes even their core values, their ethical alignment.
Just to purchase that fleeting feeling of sufficiency, that temporary hit of feeling okay, feeling secure.
Exactly. Sacrificing the true self for a manufactured sense of security. That is, by definition, voluntary slavery. You've traded inner freedom for external props.
Okay, so this takes us to a really critical Stoic distinction, one that completely reframes how we judge successful people or even ourselves when we get a bit of money. Money doesn't actually corrupt people.
Right. It's the revealer, not the corrupter. That's a huge shift in perspective.
Explain that a bit more. How does it reveal rather than corrupt?
Well, think of it like this. Money pulls back the curtain on the character that poverty might have concealed. Poverty keeps a person constrained, you see. They might be greedy or deceitful or maybe even vicious deep down, but they lack the resources, the stage, to express those traits on a grand scale.
So the source material says a greedy person who's poor can only dream of being a miser or hoarding things.
Exactly. They have the desire, but not the means. But then, once wealth arrives, boom. It's like giving a microphone to a quiet vice.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That inherent disposition, maybe it's a lust for control, maybe a desire for excess, it's instantly amplified. It gets transformed into action because now it can be. Money becomes the enabling mechanism for character flaws that were already lurking there.
It's less about creation and more about amplification, like a stress test for the soul.
Precisely. And Seneca used this powerful analogy, comparing our encounter with money to a crucible in metallurgy. He said, like gold heated in fire, the human soul only brightens or melts when it encounters wealth.
That's such a brilliant analogy because the fire doesn't create the gold or the base metal, right? It just tests the integrity of what's already there.
Exactly. Money is the furnace. If the soul is, base metal full of impurities, the heat exposes the dross and it melts down into slag, essentially worthless. But if it's truly gold, if the character has integrity, it just shines brighter under pressure.
The scary part, though, as the sources point out, is the illusion this whole process creates for us. When financial success hits, we often fall into this trap, believing that having more money automatically means you are wiser or more discerning or just fundamentally a better person.
Oh, completely. We confuse financial competence with moral integrity all the time.
It's like confusing the fancy car with the quality of the driver. The wealth doesn't upgrade your ethical operating system, does it?
Not at all. It just gives you an amplified version of your current self. So if you were arrogant before, now you become maybe overwhelmingly arrogant. If you were fearful, and here's the real paradox the Stoics saw, you now have amplified fears, specifically the fear of losing the very things you just gained.
Ah, interesting. So more money doesn't necessarily mean less fear. It can mean more, just focused differently.
Often, yes. You're still full of insecurity. Maybe that deep need for recognition hasn't gone away. But now, instead of quietly searching for validation, you buy bigger megaphones.
Like the expensive cars, the massive houses, the private jets you mentioned, broadcasting that fundamental need to the world.
And Seneca saw this clearly. He noticed that the fear of losing wealth often exceeds the joy of possessing it, which is a terrible state to be in.
So this brings us to Seneca's famous exchange with his friend Lucilius. It just cuts through all that psychological noise to define true Stoic freedom. What did he say again?
He wrote, "It is not shameful to have money, only shameful to let money have you." Simple, but devastatingly profound.
It really demands an uncomfortable look at our own agency, doesn't it? If money is dictating your decisions, the jobs you take, maybe the people you avoid associating with, the ethical risks you won't take because it might cost you,
then it's the master. You're not. And if modern society constantly tells us that wealth is the ultimate goal, the Stoic just turns that question right back around.
Seneca asks, wealthy for what? Wealthy for whom? And what does wealth truly bring to the soul? It forces the conversation out of the spreadsheet and into philosophy, into meaning.
And this leads directly to his personal stance, which I think is the ultimate declaration of independence for our materialist age. He said, "I do not hate wealth, but I do not bow to it. I can live with wealth, and I can live without it."
That sounds so simple, but living it, that's radical. It means your worth, your peace, your very identity are completely independent of your bank balance.
Completely. The truly free person isn't the one who possesses everything. It's the one who is not bound or tied down by anything, especially not their own possessions.
They have the ability to walk away fully intact, regardless of financial circumstances. That's real power.
That's the goal. #2, the trap of illusory power and the ego. Okay, so if the first section showed how money merely reveals what's already there, now we need to transition to how it can actively distort character. This is where the mirror starts to turn into, a mask of false power.
And the ego gets involved?
Big time. The ego starts confusing temporary control over things or people with true mastery over the self.
And this distortion is dangerous partly because it's often celebrated, isn't it? We admire that kind of power.
We do. But Seneca observes something crucial. Wealth doesn't actually make people more powerful in a cosmic fundamental sense. He said it only makes them forget their limits.
Forgetting limits. That sounds like the setup for a fall.
It often is. That false sense of omnipotence, the belief that your money buys you superior judgment or maybe even immunity from consequences, that's the first, most dangerous step toward downfall. Hubris, basically.
And we see this playing out all the time in high power situations, right? When you're accustomed to commanding, say, legions of employees or vast financial markets.
Exactly. You get habituated to ordering and having it done. And this mindset immediately runs headlong into Epictetus's famous dichotomy of control. Remember that?
Right, Epictetus, the former slave. He drew that sharp line between what's internal, our judgments, our desires, our actions, things we can control, and what's external.
Things like our bodies, our reputation, and critically here, money and power. Things ultimately outside our direct control.
So the wealthy, who get used to manipulating the external world so effectively, start to believe they can command the internal and external world alike.
That's the trap. They try to transfer internal insecurity externally. The source material details this psychology perfectly. An individual buys the biggest house on the block, maybe subconsciously, to hide a deep fear of becoming homeless or irrelevant.
Or they buy an incredibly expensive, complicated watch.
To quiet that internal self-doubt about their inherent worth. They're constantly trying to purchase confidence and control instead of cultivating internal resilience, which is the only place it truly resides.
And this attempt to purchase control, it gives rise to what the sources call illusion number 2, purchased respect.
You might buy better treatment, sure. People might defer to you, they might be silent when they disagree.
But you can't buy genuine respect. Seneca was absolutely adamant about this. He said, true respect comes from virtue, not from possessions.
And crucially, respect based on money is lost the moment the money is.
Ouch. That's a devastating insight, especially for, say, our modern influencer economy. People chase millions of followers, essentially purchase attention or deference, and they mistake that for genuine connection or social capital.
Absolutely. And when the ego starts equating this kind of servitude with real respect, it leads down a dangerous path. The belief that everything is purchasable. Love, loyalty, even character.
The moment you start trying to buy loyalty, you kind of lose the ability to recognize the real thing, don't you?
You do. You become suspicious. And the brutal truth Seneca offers is that anything or anyone bought with money will inevitably leave when the money does. You end up potentially quite alone, surrounded by expensive, temporary friends or sycophants.
Okay, and then there's illusion number 3, which the sources say is maybe the most subtle trap.
Yes, the sense of deserving. You start to internalize this notion that you are somehow more worthy than others, simply because financial luck or maybe skill smiled upon you.
Which can lead to a real detachment from shared humanity, right? You start seeing yourself as separate, maybe above the rules.
Exactly. And Seneca just demolishes this entitlement with that radical reversal of common sense thinking, which is so foundational to Stoic economics. He says, no one is richer than the one who knows sufficiency.
And conversely,
No one is poorer than the one who never has enough. The entitled person, even with billions, is fundamentally impoverished because their desire keeps them perpetually lacking something. They never arrive.
this feeling of entitlement, it's like the toxic child of the ego, isn't it? And it completely forgets how temporary fortune can be.
Utterly forgets. Marcus Aurelius, who literally had everything and watched empires quake, warned against this self-conceit constantly. Don't be conceited when luck arrives, he wrote. It can leave without saying goodbye. Fortune is fickle.
So it all circles back to that core idea. Money is a catalyst. If your underlying character, your foundation, is weak or flawed, wealth will exploit that weakness.
Perfectly put. The humble person might use wealth to help others. The arrogant person uses it to dominate. The empty person uses it to buy attention and fill a void.
And when the ego is constantly fed by wealth, ethics can quickly get sidelined, can't they?
Almost inevitably, it seems. The source material notes that the wealthy often fall into this trap of believing they're somehow exempt from ethics. Maybe because their status grants them a kind of de facto immunity, or perhaps they rationalize that their ability to generate jobs or economic activity excuses their moral failings elsewhere.
It's a dangerous justification.
Very. So the goal here isn't to reject wealth outright. That's not the Stoic point. It's to teach us to look through the illusion of power that wealth creates.
To draw that unwavering line between I have and I am.
Exactly. Seneca had another insight here. We do not own gold and silver. We become slaves to it by protecting it. That captures the paradox perfectly.
How so?
Well, the sheer effort required to maintain and protect the illusion of power, to guard the wealth, to manage the status, that becomes a prison. A prison far more binding mycologically than any lack of money might have been. You're constantly vigilant, constantly anxious.
Okay, so we've moved from money revealing character to money distorting it through the ego's illusion of power. Now we go even deeper, right? To the internal visceral dependency, emotional slavery.
Yes. This is where Seneca argues that the soul is fundamentally not free if its emotional state depends on the luck of the purse.
That phrase, luck of the purse, says it all. It's about chance, volatility.
Exactly. And this gets to the core psycho-emotional issue of our modern consumer society. We often assume money only controls our physical movement, where we can go, what we can buy.
But the Stoics saw it goes much deeper. It profoundly defines and dictates our emotional landscape.
Think about it from your own perspective, listening right now. That immense joy triggered by an unexpected bonus, maybe? Or the debilitating anxiety over a potential job loss?
Or even just the sharp sting of envy you feel scrolling through social media, seeing someone else's seemingly extravagant success.
Right. All these powerful, often overwhelming emotions are triggered and modulated, sometimes hour by hour, by the monetary system we live within.
So if we make that judgmental error, the Stoics warned about equating wealth with intrinsic goodness and poverty with fundamental failure. What happens then?
Then the source material correctly warns, we've basically programmed our own minds for lifelong suffering. Because finances are inherently volatile. Markets go up, markets go down, jobs are gained, jobs are lost.
So our soul gets tossed around like a small boat in a storm.
Precisely. Anchored not to the bedrock of our own character and reason, but to the shifting sands of market sentiment or our current bank balance.
Marcus Aurelius spoke directly to this, didn't he, when he talked about the quality of life depending on the quality of our thoughts.
He did. If those thoughts are constantly fixated on or dependent on the fluctuation of gold or dollars or Bitcoin, whatever, then the soul itself starts to rust right alongside the metal. It becomes brittle, anxious, unusable for its real purpose, which is rational thought and virtue.
And this dependency, this emotional tethering to money, it feeds directly into the modern consumer engine, what the source material calls the legalized addiction.
Yeah, that's a strong term, but think about it. Consumerism isn't primarily selling you shoes or cars or gadgets. It's selling you the feeling of being complete, the feeling of being okay. A temporary injection of self-worth delivered via a credit card swipe.
And we need to delve deeper into Seneca's observation here, which feels incredibly modern, almost like he predicted neuroscience. He said, "Whoever buys to satisfy desire is borrowing a debt from their own soul."
That's it. The ancient version of the dopamine debt cycle.
Explain that cycle.
Well, when you impulsively buy something non-essential, especially to make yourself feel better, you get a quick, satisfying hit of dopamine, the brain's reward hormone. Feels good, right?
For a moment, yeah.
But that hit doesn't last. The desire might be satisfied for an hour, maybe a day, and then, crucially, your baseline level of contentment often drops lower than it was before the purchase.
Why?
Because you haven't fixed the underlying insecurity or need that triggered the purchase in the first place. You've just created a chemical dependency on external stimulus buying things to achieve temporary stability.
So it requires constantly increasing consumption.
Or maybe higher priced, more exclusive items, just to maintain that same baseline feeling of sufficiency or to get the same rush. It becomes a treadmill.
It really is slavery without chains then, enforced by our own biochemistry, manipulated by advertising.
That's the Stoic view, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And this chemical and emotional dependency inevitably leads to a full-blown crisis of identity. Stoicism asserts that the soul has its own inherent order, its own identity based on reason, virtue, our core character. But when society relentlessly venerates wealth and possessions, that internal order gets inverted. Identity gets replaced by brands, job titles, the car you drive, the neighborhood you live in.
So we stop asking, who am I, fundamentally, as a person?
And we start asking, what do I own that tells others who I am? What validates me in the eyes of the world?
Seneca warned about this too, didn't he? Something about adorning the soul.
Yes. The more you try to adorn your soul with possessions, the more naked your soul becomes. Because if your identity is fundamentally tied to your assets, you've effectively handed the world the power to define your worth.
So lose money.
You lose your perceived value, maybe even your sense of self. It's incredibly fragile.
This dependency also breeds what the sources call the paradox of fear. We normally assume it's the poor who live in constant fear of instability.
Right. But the wealthy, Seneca identified, live in fear of loss. And that fear can be the most subtle, yet the most binding form of slavery.
The more wealth you hold, the harder it is to imagine letting go. The greater the anxiety over market downturns, lawsuits, theft.
Exactly, Seneca said. He who fears losing wealth is the one who has already lost freedom. The irony is just acute, isn't it? A person might have millions, billions in assets, but be utterly miserable because all their mental and emotional energy is consumed by trying to maintain the status quo, trying to protect what they have.
It shows that wealth is really an advanced test, a test of one's emotional fortitude and attachment.
Absolutely. So, if the problem is this deep emotional programming, this tethering of our feelings to our finances, how do we break free? What's the Stoic prescription?
The sources suggest a really modern application of Seneca's practice. Stoic self-observation, like an audit of desire, almost like journaling, but specifically for your spending habits and the emotions behind them.
Right. Seneca wasn't advocating for being destitute. He lived comfortably. He advocated for being wealthy consciously. And the practice is simple in concept, yet profound in execution. It requires quiet honesty with yourself.
So what do you do?
Every time you're about to spend money on something non-essential, something beyond basic needs, you must pause. Just pause for a beat and ask yourself, am I buying this physical thing or am I actually trying to buy an emotion?
Like what kind of emotion?
Maybe, am I buying this to feel sufficient, to feel admired, to quiet this nagging self-doubt, to feel like I belong?
And if the honest answer is, yeah, I'm buying the emotion,
then you're simply paying for an illusion.
Yeah.
You're accruing that dopamine debt we talked about. You're reinforcing the chains.
So freedom in this context is the hard-won ability to just observe that powerful emotion surrounding spending, the itch, the anxiety, the desire for status without instantly reacting to it.
Yes. It's hitting the pause button on impulse. The ultimate form of wealth from this perspective is emotional freedom. It's the ability to not have your deepest feelings and subsequent actions manipulated by the numbers in your bank account or the ads on your screen or what your neighbor just bought.
You're truly wealthy when you can look upon your riches or your lack of them without your hands shaking either with the fear of holding on or the desire to acquire more.
That's the Stoic ideal of inner wealth. #Tech4. The erosion of collective ethics when everything has a price.
Okay, we've gone deep into the individual's emotional slavery to money. Now let's scale up, as the sources do, to the societal impact. What happens when this transactional mindset infects everything? We're talking about the commercialization of all value.
Right. If the individual's internal compass is broken, if it's constantly being pulled toward profit or acquisition, then the collective ethical map of society starts to disappear entirely, gets distorted.
And this is where Seneca's warning becomes incredibly relevant, almost prophetic for the 21st century. He said, when people begin to calculate whether kindness is profitable, ethics is already dead.
Chilling, isn't it? Because we are absolutely living in a transactional society that tries to quantify everything. Value is so often measured purely in terms of yield, return on investment, marketability.
The source material highlights this shift to quantification perfectly. A like on social media becomes a measure of social value. An ad contract becomes a proxy for influence. Even a charitable contribution
Is often reduced, consciously or unconsciously, to a marketing opportunity or a tax write-off. We seem to inhabit a world where almost everything has a price tag attached, but maybe very few things retain true, unquantifiable value. Things like integrity, or sincere compassion, or inconvenient truths.
Marcus Aurelius directly cautioned against this, didn't he? Against letting the soul be bought.
Even by the applause of the crowd, he said. Yet today, the crowd doesn't even have to actively buy our soul. We often willingly auction it off on social platforms, chasing those quantifiable metrics, the likes, the shares, the follower counts, seeking external validation.
So the pursuit of metric-driven value replaces the pursuit of truth-driven value.
I think that's a fair summary of the danger. And this inevitably breeds what the sources call the instrumentalization of goodness, or maybe we could call it artificial ethics. Meaning we do good things, or appear to do good things, not because it's intrinsically the right thing to do according to our reasoned principles, but because it's beneficial for our brand, our image, our bottom line.
We see examples everywhere, right? Like green brands that exist purely for revenue without real commitment.
Exactly. Or ethical-sounding posts used only for public image repair after a scandal. Community campaigns orchestrated solely to gain consumer trust and market share. Seneca had a term for this.
What was it?
He called it artificial ethics, where the soul only looks good because the spotlight happens to be on it. It's performative.
And when ethics becomes just another calculated tool, a means to an end, like profit or fame,
Then truth and sincerity become commodities. They're only deployed when they're financially convenient or reputationally advantageous. Otherwise, they're liabilities.
and this corrosive profit logic, it doesn't just stay in the commercial world, it filters up, doesn't it, into institutions that were maybe meant to enlighten and protect society.
Sadly, yes. We are witnessing, in many areas, the pricing of the soul of our civilization. Think about education, art, journalism fields, once primarily dedicated, at least in theory, to seeking truth, beauty, understanding.
Now often seems subservient to profit logic.
It certainly feels that way sometimes. Consider the modern media landscape, as the sources point out. Publishers might choose books based heavily on projected revenue and market trends, rather than purely on intellectual merit or artistic value.
Or journalists might face pressure to omit crucial, inconvenient facts because honest, nuanced articles generate fewer clicks, fewer inflammatory interactions, less engagement.
Rather than simplified outrage bait. We slowly normalize the selling of beliefs, the tailoring of truth to fit the market, until perhaps we sell out the very conviction of what is right or wrong.
Seneca was scathing about this kind of moral marketplace. He said, doing good for praise.
It's like buying merit with counterfeit currency. Because the act isn't driven by intrinsic virtue, it holds no real value to the soul. It's empty.
Stoicism then sees ethics as this necessary weight, something that keeps humans grounded in reality and virtue.
Exactly. But modern society often teaches speed, scalability, profit maximization over that kind of groundedness. We talk incessantly about justice, morality, sustainability.
But how often do we genuinely sacrifice our own comfort, our convenience, or potential revenue for those principles? It's rare.
It is rare, and this is why Seneca's instruction to Lucilius is so vital today. Do the right thing, not because others are watching, but because your soul is watching.
Ah, the internal audience.
Yes. The problem of the modern age, arguably, is that external surveillance, social media monitoring, public opinion polls, the constant need for validation has started to replace the internal conscience for many people.
So we stop controlling ourselves through reasoned conviction.
And instead, we wait for external judgment or monitoring to guide our behavior. What will people think becomes more important than, is this right?
And this leads to perhaps the most dangerous societal result of this quantification, the easy correlation we make between wealth and virtue.
Yes. Society constantly commits this error, doesn't it? Equating money with competence or even moral goodness. The rich are automatically assumed to be smart. The famous are often considered right, their opinions given undue weight.
While the quiet, humble person pursuing non-profitable virtues may be honesty, kindness when it costs something is often deemed a failure in the eyes of the marketplace.
Marcus Aurelius saw this danger clearly. He told his followers essentially, look at what others admire and you will see the very things that are corrupting them.
Wow. So when we prioritize the visible result, the wealth, the fame over the integrity of the process, the virtue involved in getting there,
We stop respecting truth and character and we begin worshiping outcomes, regardless of the ethical cost involved in achieving them.
which makes living virtuously feel, well, almost like a luxury good itself, something difficult to afford.
It does require immense courage today, because, let's be honest, kindness doesn't reliably yield profit in a cutthroat environment. Sincerity rarely goes viral compared to outrage or performance. And integrity can absolutely cost you a job, a contract, or social standing.
Yet, Seneca insisted our metric must remain internal. What was his line?
Good deeds need no audience, only our soul needs to know. This is the essence of non-profit virtue.
Non-profit virtue. I like that.
Acting correctly solely for the inner peace and integrity it provides, not for any external reward. The Stoic isn't called to leave the world to run from the chaotic marketplace. They're called to step into it, but without allowing the transactional, quantifying nature of the age to stain their character. To keep that internal compass true, regardless of the magnetic interference from the outside.
Okay, so we've thoroughly diagnosed the corruption, both the individual's emotional entanglement and the collective ethical erosion. Now finally we turn to the prescription, the Stoic solution. Self-mastery through temperance, or Tito, as it's sometimes called.
Exactly. This isn't just a passive idea, it's an active tool. It's the Stoic technology, if you will, designed to help us regain control over both those relentless external pressures and that internal addictive emotional landscape we just discussed.
Now, temperance often gets a bad rap, doesn't it? Sounds like deprivation, misery, and forced poverty.
It's easily misunderstood that way.
Yeah.
But for the Stoics, especially Seneca, it wasn't about poverty at all. He defined it as sufficiency. Remember his line, true wealth does not come from possessing much, but from the ability to need little.
The ability to need little. That's the key. It's internal.
It's entirely internal. It's not about the number in your bank account. It's about the state of your desires. It's about recognizing and genuinely valuing the state of enough.
Marcus Aurelius had a great clarifying question for this, didn't he? Something about counting what can't be bought.
Yes. He basically said, if you want to feel truly rich, take a moment and count the things you have that money absolutely cannot buy. Your health, maybe your relationships, your integrity, your peace of mind.
That reframes wealth instantly.
It does. Temperance, then, is the art of living amidst gold, or amidst the constant opportunity to acquire more without being dazzled by it, without feeling that relentless compulsion to acquire or display it. It's like philosophical insulation against temptation.
So, if modern society operates like this hyper-efficient dopamine machine, constantly triggering desires,
Temperance is the philosophical antidote. The Stoics were brilliant psychologists. They knew you can't just eradicate desire by sheer force of will. That usually backfires.
so what do you do instead?
You have to train desire. Seneca taught that the goal isn't fighting pleasure itself or avoiding nice things entirely. The goal is learning to control the impulse, developing the ability to pause, to reflect, and crucially, to stop before desire transforms into compulsion, into addiction.
Which in our age, that feels incredibly countercultural. Every notification, every advertisement, every social comparison seems designed to beg you for just a little more.
A little more attention, a little more spending, feeding a little more anxiety.
Yes. And in that context, temperance becomes, as the sources suggest, perhaps the most beautiful, quiet, and yet powerful act of rebellion against the modern consumer state.
It's like a silent protest conducted within your own mind.
And that internal rebellion is a source of immense power. Real strength, Stoic strength, lies in that trained ability to look at something desirable and say, with genuine contentment, not resentment, it is enough. I don't need that to be whole.
Seneca said something about the greatest winner.
The greatest winner is the one who defeats himself, meaning the one who conquers their own runaway desires and impulses. Temperance isn't passive weakness. It's an active, almost militant strength. It requires constant vigilance against the pervasive mechanisms of manipulation that define our economy and media landscape.
And this self-imposed restriction, this moderation, it has cognitive benefits too, right? Clarity. Huge benefits, Marcus Aurelius advised. Remove the superfluous, and your soul will see the nature of all things. When you consciously reduce your desires, you aren't just saving money or simplifying your life externally, you are creating mental space.
And why is that mental space so important?
Because it allows the subtle voice of reason, the voice of your rational soul, which is typically drowned out by the cacophony of ambition, Advertising, social noise, and constant wanting it allows that quiet voice to finally be heard again.
So the Stoic pursues simplicity not just as an aesthetic choice, like minimalism.
Not primarily. It's a practical necessity. It's needed to reconnect with their core rational self, their logos.
Which brings us right back to the theme of inner freedom. The person who is truly enslaved, then, isn't necessarily the one who lacks external possessions.
No, it's the person who has reached a state where they feel they cannot live without certain levels of money, possessions, or status. They become dependent.
And Seneca stressed, didn't he, that no one is truly free if they are dependent on things outside their direct control.
Absolutely. Money, status, possessions, they're ultimately externals, subject to fortune. Temperance is the mind's declaration of independence from that external volatility.
It cuts the chains of impulse
Blocks the constant, distracting fire of the ego's need for more.
and frees the mind from that exhausting, miserable cycle of want, possess, inevitably lose, or fear losing, feel lack, want again.
Exactly. The temperate person doesn't necessarily scorn possessions. They might enjoy them, but they fiercely love their inner peace more than any external treasure. That peace becomes non-negotiable.
And temperance is also critical for restoring collective ethics, isn't it? Connecting back to the previous section.
Absolutely vital. As we establish, the commodification of value, the everything has a price mentality, destroys our shared humanity. But the Stoics would argue that only when an individual feels sufficient within themselves, only when they have achieved some measure of victory over their own internal greed and restlessness, only then can they genuinely share, act altruistically, and contribute ethically to the community.
Seneca argued, you can't really help others effectively if you're perpetually controlled by your own restless desires.
Pretty much. Your own neediness gets in the way. Temperance restores our fundamentally human, social nature in a world that's become obsessed with individual acquisition. It provides the necessary internal discipline before we can effectively express true kindness, justice, and wisdom towards others.
Okay, so how do we make this practical, especially in the digital age? Seneca wouldn't tell us to ditch our smartphones and live in a cave.
No, the Stoics are practical. They tell us to use our tools with purpose and intention, not to be used by them. So we desperately need practices for practical digital temperance in a world designed for endless scrolling, clicking, and consuming.
Give us some examples.
Okay, simple things. Introduce friction. Before reflexively checking social media, pause and ask, what rational goal does this specific check serve right now? Often the answer is none. It's just habit or avoidance.
Okay, what else?
Before impulse buying something online, especially if it pops up in an ad, just pause, maybe for 3 deep breaths, and ask that crucial question. Do I want the actual thing, or do I want the fleeting feeling of having purchased something new? Be honest.
That distinction is key.
And maybe the most powerful daily ritual, suggested by the source material adapting Seneca, journal every night. Just one simple question. Was I less needy today, less driven by external wants or fears than I was yesterday?
Wow, that's a daily active affirmation of freedom against the machine, a small step towards sufficiency.
Exactly. It's training, not overnight transformation. #6. Ethical action in a chaotic age.
All right, so the soul is being refined through this practice of temperance. We're aiming for sufficiency, for less neediness. But the Stoics weren't advocating for navel-gazing, were they? We have to put this purified self back into the chaotic world.
Absolutely not. Withdrawal wasn't the goal. Seneca reminds us quite forcefully, we were not born merely to watch the drama of life from the stands, but to act in it, and to act with virtue. Engagement is crucial.
But here lies the gap, right? The gap between knowing what's right and actually doing it. That seems to be the perennial human struggle.
It really is. And it's maybe the biggest gap in modern philosophy or self-help too. It's not usually a lack of intellectual understanding. We often know what's good or right. The breakdown happens in the execution.
Marcus Aurelius seemed obsessed with this gap in his own life, constantly writing in his journal.
Constantly self-admonishing. Things like, you have understood what is good, you see the rational path, so why do you wait to execute it? Why the delay? Understanding is passive, it's comfortable, but ethical action, that's hard.
Why is it hard?
Because it demands responsibility, it demands accountability. It often involves friction, discomfort, maybe conflict. It exposes you.
And our digital age often trains us for the opposite, doesn't it? Voicing strong opinions from behind a screen, but maybe rarely living with the genuine, messy consequences of moral conviction in the physical world.
Precisely. Which is why Stoicism offers that necessary countermedicine. Think like a philosopher, use reason, seek clarity, understand virtue. But then, crucially, act like a warrior with discipline, courage, and commitment, even when it's difficult.
So, in a time like ours, which feels defined by moral chaos, fake news swirling, intense political polarization, the lines blurring between truth and performance, how does the Stoic navigate?
The Stoic doesn't seek safety or retreat in that chaos. They seek direction. They look for the virtuous path. Marcus Aurelius had another great line. If you don't know where you're going, your ethical destination, every wind is a headwind. You'll just be blown about by circumstance and opinion.
So ethics isn't just a set of rules, it's more like a trained natural reflex.
Yes, the trained reflex of a disciplined soul that knows its purpose, knows its values. It becomes your internal compass in the storm.
And using that compass demands courage. Especially, the sources emphasize the courage to stand alone when necessary.
That's a tough one. The Stoic must cultivate a difficult, counterintuitive kind of courage. Sometimes it means having the courage to remain silent when an emotional mob is screaming for blood or outrage.
And the flip side.
Having the courage to speak truth clearly and calmly when everyone else is silent, maybe out of comfort, maybe out of fear of consequences.
So courage here isn't just about physical bravery.
Not at all. It's primarily moral courage. It's the commitment to live by your deeply held, reasoned values, even when there's no external applause, no validation, maybe even when there's criticism or penalty.
When public opinion shifts like the wind with the speed of an algorithm.
You need an anchor. Maintaining ethical consistency requires an iron will, anchored in your principles. You stand still internally, while the crowd rushes past in one direction, then maybe rushes back the other way tomorrow.
Now, another virtue often misunderstood is kindness. Society often frames it as soft, maybe even weak, especially in competitive environments.
Right, a sentimental weakness. But Marcus Aurelius argued the exact opposite. He said, kindness is the strength of the self-aware. It comes from understanding our shared humanity, our shared flaws.
And the Stoic practices forgiveness. Why? Not necessarily because the other person deserves it.
Not primarily, and certainly not to let them off the hook for wrongdoing. The Stoic chooses forgiveness, or at least letting go of corrosive anger, because they prioritize their own inner peace over the self-destructive poison of hatred, resentment, and perpetual retribution. Holding on to anger harms you most.
So, in our current age, which feels like an age of stone throwing, the quick judgment online, the swift condemnation, the public shaming.
In that environment, choosing kindness, choosing rational understanding over immediate condemnation, choosing forgiveness, that is perhaps the most radical, brave, and countercultural form of resistance imaginable.
Forgiveness as a courageous act. Interesting.
It takes real strength in a world that often demands instant, perpetual retribution.
Okay, so we act with courage, with kindness. But this ethical action must always be guided by something clear, right? An internal purpose.
Always. Stoic action isn't ultimately about winning in the conventional zero-sum sense, beating the competition, getting the promotion, winning the argument online. It's about maintaining your integrity throughout the process, regardless of the outcome.
That's the real metric of success, then.
That's the only one that matters for the soul. Marcus Aurelius constantly instructed himself, whenever you do something, always ask, does this action help me become a better, more virtuous person? Is it aligned with reason and justice?
And if the answer is no,
then regardless of the external acclaim, the financial success, the social status it might bring, that action is a philosophical failure because it has compromised the self, the core.
The power of this kind of Stoic action, then, it isn't flashy. It doesn't necessarily manifest in huge, dramatic gestures or movements.
Not usually. It spreads more subtly through the quiet, enduring energy of consistency. Think about it. The calm, reasoned person amidst a furious argument. The just decision made quietly amidst a frenzy of fake news or panic.
Seneca taught that virtue shouldn't be kept hidden.
No, it must shine upon others, but primarily through consistent example, not through loud proclamation. Your actions speak.
And this creates a subtle but maybe more enduring ripple effect than grandstanding.
The Stoics believe so, which leads to the final, crucial mission for the modern Stoic, as Seneca put it. No one can save the entire world, perhaps, but you can save your own humanity. Protect your integrity.
So the goal isn't necessarily running away from the messiness of reality.
No, it's facing it, but facing it equipped with virtue, clarity, and kindness. Real change, the only change you truly control, begins with changing your reaction to the world, your inner response. That's where your power lies.
Okay, this feels like the culmination. We bring the entire journey inward now. We've navigated the treacherous landscape of wealth, the traps of the ego, we've understood the need for temperance, the call to virtuous action in the world. And now we arrive at the final destination of the Stoic path.
The inner citadel. The archentos, the Stoics might call it. The internal fortress, the sanctuary within, that is designed to be untouchable by external forces.
Marcus Aurelius affirmed this sanctuary is always available, right? Didn't he say something about a strength within?
He did. He wrote variations of, in you there is a strength. If you turn into it, nothing external can truly harm your core self. This citadel is the ultimate place of unwavering inner order, even when the external world is pure chaos, algorithms swirling, markets crashing, anger dominating the headlines.
It's like an unconquered territory inside.
Exactly. The place where you can observe the external drama without judgment, without getting swept away, where you can reflect on your own actions without crippling self-condemnation or paralyzing guilt. It allows you to stand just slightly above the immediate noise of the world and see it clearly without being absorbed or stained by it.
But crucially, the sources stress this sanctuary isn't built during easy times. You don't construct it on sunny days.
No, absolutely not. Seneca reminds us, no strong person is forged from convenience. Fire tests gold, adversity tests the person.
So every setback we face, maybe a loss of money, damage to our reputation, a misunderstanding with someone we care about, every moment of fear we overcome.
Those are the very bricks and mortar that build the citadel's walls. The ability to endure suffering, not stoically in the sense of being emotionless, but maintaining a clear, reasoned mind through the suffering, that's what solidifies this fortress against future shocks. Each challenge overcome strengthens the foundation.
And the building process itself requires solitude, silence.
Often, yes. Some measure of solitude and silence is usually necessary. Marcus Aurelius confessed in his Meditations, "I learned the most when only I remained," when I was alone with my thoughts.
Why is solitude important here?
Because in loneliness, the weak or unprepared mind might find only emptiness or anxiety. But the Stoic, practicing self-reflection, finds the precious opportunity to finally meet the true, small, rational voice of their own soul, that voice which is typically drowned out by the constant noise of ambition, social pressures, and external demands.
And it's through this internal work, this building and retreating into the citadel, that we grasp the true meaning of Stoic freedom.
I believe so. It reframes freedom entirely. It's not the license to do whatever you impulsively want. It's a profound ability not to be compelled by external forces or internal impulses to do what you don't want, which your reason tells you is wrong or harmful.
Meaning not being pushed around by fear.
Or not being pulled around by desire, by greed, by anger. That non-reactivity is freedom.
And the claim is that no external force can truly violate the citadel.
Because they cannot ultimately make you lose your inner peace unless you consent to it. They can take your money, yes. They can take your job, damage your reputation, even harm your body. But they cannot take your judgment about those things. They cannot take your commitment to virtue. They cannot force you to feel despair or hatred.
That refusal to give internal consent to turmoil, that's the ultimate line of defense.
That is the gate of the citadel, and only you hold the key.
This perspective, it fundamentally shifts the focus, doesn't it? Away from external competition winning the market, winning the argument, getting ahead of others.
And towards inner victory. Marcus Aurelius constantly challenged himself with thoughts like, if you win the whole world, gain all the power and riches, but your soul is defeated, corrupted, enslaved, what use is that?
So the Stoic seeks victory within. A victory that has no external medals, no trophies, no public recognition.
Only the deep, abiding peace that money absolutely cannot buy. It's the tranquil state of needing no longer to prove oneself to anyone, including yourself. You are sufficient.
And this internal sufficiency, the citadel, allows for what the sources call portable tranquility.
Yes. Peace is not found by seeking a perpetually quiet, problem-free world because, let's face it, that doesn't exist. Peace is found in cultivating a mind that remains undisturbed by the noise, by the chaos.
Seneca had a line about happiness and possessions.
He said, "No one is happy simply because they have everything, but because they have not lost themselves in what they have." The inner citadel is that refuge you carry with you everywhere, an emotional constant in a world of endless variables.
And this fortress, ultimately, what is it built from? What are the materials?
It's built from the only things that are truly yours and cannot be stolen. The unstealable virtues. Strength, wisdom, justice, courage, kindness, temperance.
So when everything external eventually collapses or changes, and it always does, right? Fame fades, jobs end, relationships shift, wealth evaporates.
The citadel endures because its foundations are internal.
These qualities, virtue, wisdom, they cannot be taken away by external forces. They can only be
abandoned by the individual's own choice, by neglect. That's the ultimate philosophical realization, perhaps. Stoicism isn't about escaping the world. It's about developing an inner core that cannot be dissolved by the world.
The inner citadel has no external gates, no guards.
Only you. The person who decides, moment by moment, what thoughts, what reactions, what values are allowed inside, and what disturbances must be kept out. #tag outro.
Wow. Okay, we've completed this really comprehensive journey, haven't we? Following that circle from the external world of wealth and societal pressures deep into the internal self.
Yeah, we saw how money reveals character, then how it can create illusions of power leading to emotional slavery, which in turn erodes collective ethics.
And how the antidote involves the discipline of temperance, which then fuels virtuous action in the world, ultimately culminating in the safety and peace of that unassailable inner citadel.
And the final call to action from Seneca, it remains so simple, yet may be profoundly challenging in our age of constant external stimulus. Withdraw into yourself, there is no place more peaceful. Find that center.
Because when you find that inner place, that citadel, you discover you don't actually need to win or possess or prove anything to the external world to feel whole, to feel okay.
That's it. True strength, Stoic strength, doesn't come from dominating others or dominating the marketplace. It comes from the ability not to be dominated by anyone or anything, especially not by your own desires or fears.
This raises an important question then, maybe for reflection after listening. When you look back at your actions, even just today, what internal fortress did they help you build? Or perhaps, what parts did they maybe help tear down?
That's a powerful closing thought for self-examination.
So what does this all mean? I guess in a world where everyone seems focused on the grand ambition of changing the world externally, the Stoic chooses the quiet but maybe ultimate freedom of changing how they react to the world internally.
And that path, the sources suggest, leads to becoming that person standing still amidst the storm, not because they're rigid or unfeeling, but because they've cultivated such deep inner peace that they have, in a way, become the calm eye of the storm itself.
So for you, the listener, right now, perhaps the final question is, what is the single chain of desire or fear or reactivity that you could work on cutting today just to gain a fraction more of that incredible inner freedom